Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Warrant Committee's meeting this evening. Before we start, the chair thanks everybody who contributed to completing the draft on time and getting everything in for the printer for the warrant special town meeting warrant that's taking place in February. It was an effort, and I certainly personally appreciate it, and I think we did a very good job given that the constraints came upon us very quickly. To that end, I call the meeting to order and will ask for a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting. If there are any changes, please let's hear about them. No changes. Do we have a motion to accept the meeting minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
No discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Our first business, actually, Cheryl just left the room, unfortunately, because I was going to ask... Oh, okay, terrific. We're going to preempt the agenda that we published a little bit and ask the chair of the planning board to come and present to us the changes to the two articles. The two articles that we already voted on, because there were language changes, we have to look at them and vote on them again. So Cheryl, welcome. We're very happy to have you. Everybody knows Cheryl Yes, who's the chair of the planning board. And take it away.
Good evening. Thank you for considering these revisions. We held our public hearings on the articles last Thursday. And during that hearing, we'll take the first one as the, I'm not sure how it's numbered, but it's the setbacks and height one.
Yep. That's out. Is that number 5?
Is it number 5?
Number 5.
Okay, I'll make a note here.
No, it's not number 5.
What is
No,
it?
it's 3.
It's 3, sorry.
Number 3?
My mistake.
Okay. As we looked at it and we talked about it, we realized that the way we had written it, we would be eliminating the no disturbance zone completely, which we realized we didn't want to do. What we really wanted to do was give ourselves the discretion to allow the roadway to partially go into the 75-foot zone. So this language cleans that up and makes our intent more explicit.
Okay. Does everybody received the revision?
Yes. You have the language, right? Yes. Okay.
So the significance of the change is, in a nutshell, cleaning up the setback
Right.
language to make the provision universal to others or to this specifically?
So you may recall, I think Bill came to you when I was unable to, that there were two provisions in here that addressed the rear yard setback.
Right.
We were allowing a roadway within 50 feet, but then we had a no disturbance zone that said 75 feet. So how can
Yes.
you allow a roadway, right? So then we said, okay, it won't apply, that no disturbance won't apply to the rear lot line. Then we realized we actually don't want it not to apply to everything. We wanted to allow us discretion to allow the roadway to go partially in that zone between 50 and 75 feet. So this language gives us the opportunity to waive it, and therefore we don't have to be as explicit about the language.
Okay. Everybody's clear with this?
Yep.
Okay. Do we have any objection to this revision of language?
No, make a motion to accept the revised language in Article 3.
Do we have a second? Any discussion further? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Lynn, we have that revised language. Thank you, terrific.
Great,
Thank you, Cheryl. Next.
Now, Article 5.
This is right, okay.
It was brought to the board's attention that the town meeting passed an article that the planning board sponsored last fall that addressed pre-existing non-conforming residences that could go to a special permit process rather than a variance process. We didn't want those to get triggered, those kind of properties to get triggered, that they would trigger this traffic mitigation bylaw. And so we added this sentence in the first paragraph that says this bylaw shall not apply to a single residential structure which contains not more than 4 units. Recognizing that some residences have more than 1 unit in them. And so, again, it was not to cause hardship for single family or for these single residential structures. And then you received an email from Town Council John Flynn that said that needed to be added to, some language needed to be added to the top of this, right? So he sent me this.
He supplied that.
Right. So that's what we're trying to do there.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Cheryl? Okay, are there any objections to this change? Okay, if so, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the revision and incorporate it into the warrant.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion further? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Passes. Cheryl, thank you very much.
Thank you for working with
and
us on these two
everything
articles.
worked this time. Let's see if we can get
We're
it.
trying, right?
No, we're doing better. That's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming to present to us. Okay, so that having been done, the warrant should be ready for the review tomorrow for the final draft to go to the printer. And thank you again, everybody. I know it was a lot of work, and I know the town will appreciate it when all of these things start to bear fruit. Okay, so on to the next, which is the budget that have been presented to us by the town departments, and we have tonight we're pleased to welcome Chief King and Chief Grant, and Chase is coming?
Chase is en route.
Okay,
Correct.
perfect. So Chief King, you're in the front seat, so welcome. Come and present to us. We're happy to have you, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. How are you, buddy? Basically, the budget this year, there's not a lot of changes, and I can answer any questions. I'll just give you a brief summary. You know, it's pretty standard. The biggest changes I kind of highlight in my budget summary. We have some vacancies that are currently being filled. A couple of changes since I wrote the summary to you is I listed, you know, that there was two I plan on attending the February Academy. They actually go a week from today, so those two have been filled. That dispatcher position's been filled. They've already started work, and so that's just an update on those vacancies. The salary and wages, they're pretty much standard steps and raises built in there. There are no contractual raises for next year yet because the unions haven't negotiated. Just a big change, not big in the sense of a cost item, but just a noteworthy change, and I believe Mr. Hurley talked about this last year when I was here, and it's come up at a couple selectmen meetings and stuff I've talked about. But as a parking enforcement officer, that would be a civilian position. That's how it's done in most cities and towns. So listed in this salary and wages, you'll see a position for 19 hours a week for a parking enforcement officer. And what that would do is have a designated person with some flexible hours. The total cost is only, you know, $19,000 and change roughly. If they even wrote one ticket based on a $25 ticket, one ticket an hour, which is, I mean, really modest, that alone would come to 24 grand a year. So it would more than pay for itself.
Position, yeah.
And, you know, revenue isn't the goal of that. It's really compliance, but, you know, it is realistic. It's going to generate revenue.
If you're looking at an offset, I'm always curious about this. Traffic tickets, parking tickets, how does that figure into revenue generation if you're looking at it from that perspective for the town?
You know, any money collected goes to the town. It doesn't go to the police department.
Right.
It goes back to the town general
Right.
fund. So, you know, it factors in the sense of, you know, times are tough and it's hard to ask for a new position, and we respect that. That's the only position being asked for. And, you know, by being part-time, you know, the town isn't expending, you know, pension and health care costs on it. At the same time, you know, they're going to address a need. You know, I'm only in my third year as chief, but I've been with the department a long time, and traffic and parking, I just, you know, number one concerns. We've talked to the Chamber of Commerce about this. We've talked to residents about this. I've talked with the selectmen about this. So it's an ongoing problem. It isn't like a recent, in the last year problem. So I think it addresses a problem at really will end up being no cost to the town and actually a financial gain to the town. Again, that isn't the motive. The problem is the motive, but
Yeah.
I think there's a benefit.
Tom?
John, when's the last time that we, any idea when the last time we looked at what our fee structures in terms of parking tickets, and when's the last time they were raised?
I don't know that I couldn't tell you the year they were last raised. It hasn't been during any period of time that I've been in
So it's been many, many
administration,
years.
but
It's been a number of years,
yeah,
probably.
it's definitely been a number of years.
Would it be warranted, since,
I think it's,
you know, $25 isn't much for parking tickets?
yeah, I think it's surely worth a review. I think you'd have to really audit each specific violation to see, like, the lowest tickets are
Right.
$15 one, the majority are 25, but there are some that are 100.
Higher, yeah.
Yeah.
Like handicap.
What's the process for increasing the ticket fees?
We basically just have to get it voted by the selectmen of regulations.
And would they take into comparison surrounding cities and towns and what they charge?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for them, but I think we certainly should.
Okay,
And most of the violations are probably in that range. I think where we see the big discrepancy is we're like 100 on a handicap. A lot of communities are far higher to really discourage that because it's such a serious offense. And it's usually the real serious ones, the fire hydrant, snow removal, the things that, are kind of safety issues. Obviously, you have the higher fees. Most communities aren't going to put $100 on somebody who's, overtime parking. They did 2.5 hours in a 2-hour spot,
Yeah, right,
just
yeah.
because of, you got to balance kind of your interests here.
Yes.
But that's a new position, or would be a new position if, approved. But I think there's a lot of support for it, and like I said, the cost at $19,000 and change, I think would not be an issue. The other costs associated with that were already incurring, like, the town contracts with a company that processes the tickets. One of my police officers, twice a month, does ticket appeals, so, if there's an increase, it won't really affect him. There'll be no increase, really, administrative costs on that. That's really the standout one. I did put under the general expenses, new equipment, you'll see I put in a 3% increase on both of those. On the general, that's only $15,000, but there hasn't been an increase in 5 years. We've been absorbing those year-to-year increases where I think a lot of other people build those in. And on the new equipment, it's been 7 years. So, we kind of really only ask when we think we need it, but those costs are creeping up each year.
What is the equipment that's needed specifically?
That'd be like cruisers or equipping the cruisers,
Okay.
stuff like that. So, the police department, kind of, welcome to asking questions. That's kind of just a budget overview. We're fairly busy. We're a 24-hour operation like the fire department. We have a lot of very minor calls. We have a lot of very serious calls. It's things I think everybody here knows. Traffic's a huge issue. On the, property crimes, it's really like house breaks, car breaks, house breaks during the day, car breaks at night. Those are the type of things we're dealing with. Common trends. Domestic violence is a common trend. That's really underreported. You don't see it because we don't publish those in public logs and stuff like that due to laws on them. There's, I mentioned this last year, but there's still an increase we've seen over the last couple of years. So it's not new this year of technology issues, elderly, financial crimes, internet phone scams. And, on the school end, there's a lot of, technology issues like, what was, schoolyard bullying has kind of escalated to some, Facebook type bullying or Snapchat stuff. They're noteworthy because, they take more time to investigate and they take more training for the police officer to stay up to date with these technologies and stuff like that. So those are kind of the common trends we're facing today.
If you had to report on an increased incidence of a certain type of a crime, what would it be in the past year?
I'd say it's, really two things. It's that the biggest increases are in substance use issues and mental health issues. I know I've mentioned them before. We've, twofold on those, like it's more of a problem. It's become more prevalent. That's the bad news. The good news, I think there's been a reduction in the stigma behind these issues, and I think we're doing more, which means more people reach out. The worst case scenarios are the, people who, have mental health issues, they're not getting proper treatment, and they become violent with their family members. Those are kind of the worst case ones we're dealing with, but unfortunately, it's fairly common. Another issue on the more minor is just, these, I don't want to say minor, like minimizing it, but, an increase in the youth using substances, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, our opiate deaths has increased, the number of overdoses have increased. We're doing a lot around it, with the opiates, we have Narcan in every cruiser. The amount of times we're using it, it's more and more, but that's more saves. We've done a couple of good things. We've got a very new this year, been with the department a few months, but it wasn't in my prior years here, is we obtained a grant, so no cost to the town, and we split with the Braintree Police Department a mental health clinician. So I have that mental health clinician in my police station. and split half the time between Milton and Braintree. And she does follow-ups with our officers, so, for example, there's a resident in town that we were arrested multiple times for mental health issues, and, the police put them in a cell, they go to court, sometimes they get treatment, sometimes it's jail time, but they're back in the house, they're back involved with violent incidents in the neighborhood and stuff like that. She's gone back with officers, got this person a placement, put them in McLean, getting them treatment. So we're really doing a lot of positive stuff on that. Same on kind of the drug stuff. We started a follow-up program, and we got some great partners. So now an officer will go out, if somebody overdoses, we'll go visit the family after the fact. We used to just go to that emergency call and they went off in an ambulance, that ended it. Now we're going back the next day, we bring a member of Minette Community Health, they give the family Narcan so they can provide it before we even arrive if it's a repeat caller, which is a problem we have. And we bring a recovery coach, also we're not paying for, received through a grant, who gives this person their cell phone number. Hey, I'll help you through the process. I'll find you treatment. I'll help you during your recovery. So, those are probably the two biggest increases, which is the bad news. But on the positive, I think we've got a lot of resources. Credit to the other people involved and partners that are helping us.
If you had to fast forward to an event which would require massive intervention by the police, some type of an emergency, some type of a hazmat problem, or God forbid, something happened at one of the schools, similar to what's happened in other parts of the country, do you feel that the department has enough person power to handle it? And how would you, if you didn't feel that, how would you go ahead and solve the problem?
Yeah, I feel we have enough.
The technical resources and all that stuff too.
Yeah,
You have everything.
I feel we have enough, and I feel we're doing the proper training. You never have enough if it's, a mass casualty or something like that. But, the common is, we have a few shootings each year, most of them aren't fatal, thank God. But, real quick, if you're, running a handful of cruisers, all of a sudden everybody's tied up. But, a couple things to tell you this. If we ever had, a threat in the school, like an active shooter or anything like that,
Right.
Beyond our resources, we have formal agreements as well as informal for mutual aid with all the surrounding communities. So I think we would get a lot of resources very quick. We train with them. I mean, I have, memorandums of agreement with Boston Police, the Metrolec, the Norfolk County Chiefs. We have a series of agreements on who does what and helps, whether those resources are just bodies, if you needed a search for, a missing kid in the woods, like, or if it was, a shooter at the high school. So I feel we're prepared. I don't want to say, there's all those people are, we don't have 30 cops in a cruiser on a shift waiting for that disaster to happen, but we can really get those people pretty quickly through these mutual aid agreements.
Questions for the chief?
I just have one. The grants that you were talking about with the mental health worker, that sounds like an amazing program, and I'm just curious what the chances are of renewing that and continuing to renew that?
Yeah, hard for me to say because it's
Is it an annual grant? Or?
it's for a few years, but
Okay.
It's funding's everything. But I will say this: we've had great success back.
Exactly.
I'd say about 5-6 years ago, we brought in a domestic violence advocate, a civilian advocate who follows up on every domestic violence. That's in its 5th year. It's been renewed, and we do our work. We partner with Dove Incorporated in Quincy. And, that was funded through a Violence Against Women Act. And, when that was up for renewal, we at the Milton Police Station, we hosted them. We had members of the Executive Office of Public Safety come out. We showed them what the program was about. We argued to keep it. And, that was renewed. This drug follow-up stuff we're doing, we have, we received, a free recovery coach. We're getting free services from Minette Community Health. Now, could Minette lose funding? They could, so I can't predict. On this particular mental health one, several years ago, we kind of partnered with the National Alliance of Mental Illness and just started, we go into regular meetings with them, kind of planning, what can we do about this, what can we do about this? And, we went to the State House, and I personally spoke at the State House to try and increase funding for that, and we spent a lot of time on this. And, they're a great group, and they've done a lot for us. And when the time came, credit to them again, I think they felt we were probably a good partner. We were committed. We had gone to meetings for years, really. I don't say got nothing in return. We got a lot, but we didn't have a grant. But when that grant money came, I really feel that they prioritized us. and Braintree, and the grant wasn't through them, it was through the Department of Mental Health, but I feel their hard work got it for us. And same, I think it will get renewed because of that
I just hope that you would come
work.
to us if you ever didn't get a grant, because these programs seem very important to me.
Thank you.
And so my whole point was that I just don't want to lose that.
Yeah, it's
So
great.
just, if that ever happens, that somebody doesn't get funding, I would hope that you would come back to the warrant committee and request additional funds.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And I think that those are the things like people don't see. They see the
Right.
cruiser and the writing the tickets. And
Yeah.
those are the things, like the domestic violence fall, the mental health of some of you. Those are the behind the things, but they really reduce those repeat calls. They reduce those violent people that either the officer are wrestling with or they're going into a cell and trying to kill themselves. We'll send them off to a hospital and then we're guarding them all weekend at a hospital on overtime because you have to have somebody there with them. Like, those are the behind the scenes things that I think you really don't see in the public
They
eye.
end
but
up
it's-
costing, too.
They're happening, you know?
Significantly. Can you talk a little bit about the collective bargaining process, how that's beginning, who is going to handle it, and when the determination of the negotiation is going to be concluded?
Sure, I don't want to speak for Mike, but Mike's the
Right.
main man. You know,
Okay.
that starts up really this time of year, coming into the late winter, spring. The unions reach out, and he sets up bargaining. I attend with Mike for all the
Okay.
police ones. They're usually a lengthy process, but, you know, I just don't want to put words in Mike's mouth. But, you know, I've done it for years on both ends. I used to be
Of
the union
course.
president, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
now kind of on the management end. But Mike, and prior to that, Anne Marie.
Because if we're putting a set aside, we're just always interested to know how much we have to consider, but we'll look at that, I guess, when the time is important.
Yeah, yeah, the only reason I defer that to Mike, you know, respectfully, but, you know, he factors in, where I'm worried about the police, he has to worry about every department.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean, and health insurance and everything else, so, other issues.
There's a lot that goes
Yeah.
into it. We
But
understand.
negotiations have not started.
They have not, I know that Mike's had a brief phone call with the unions about scheduling, but it hasn't
No
started.
proposals or
No.
anything, okay.
But I'm sure we'll find out about that as it goes along anyway, through the process.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the chief?
Couple of years back, John, we did some, and through the police department, some preparedness for a town hall for, you know, a shooting incident or, and I think you did some at the schools
Yes.
as well. Have those been kept up with? I mean,
They have been. As a matter of fact, we just did a refresher at Town Hall for, you know, new employees that's been hired as recent as, well, I'd say within the last 2 months. The schools regularly, Sergeant Richmond, who's my go-to guy on this issue, attends, you know, regular every security meeting there. The first day of the school year, the professional day, Jack goes up there, I go up there, he brings a team of officers, and they give a refresher to all the school staff and a more lengthy training for new staff who wouldn't have had the prior. So we've been pretty active on that. That's one of those, you know, awful, awful things where the odds are, you know, rare, but it is becoming common, sadly, and you have to prepare for it. But, you know, and I credit Jack Richmond for that. He's really been my, you know, great asset to me on this. But he's been pretty good, whether it's, you know, the library, you know, town hall, the schools especially. And although it's rare, you know, if you look across the country, it's actually not uncommon that a lot of them are in similar
Yes.
communities to Milton. They're not in major cities. And the majority have been in communities of like 30 to 40,000 people. You know, Milton's just under 30. It's kind of ironic, you know, in a scary way.
I agree. And you're right, I mean, they basically are the real first responders because, you know,
Yeah.
in those crucial first
Yeah.
2 or 3 minutes,
Yeah, that's when,
them know
yeah,
what
life
to
or death,
do
yeah.
is crucial, but.
Thank you very much. The subcommittee will make appointments as needed, and we'll run through the process and review and vote on the budget within the next month. So thank you very much for
Thank you
coming.
very much.
Appreciate your time. Chief Grant is here to talk about the fire department.
I'd prefer to Chase if you guys are okay with that. He's got a longer commute than me.
That's perfectly fine. Chase, we're happy to have you. Chase Berkeley, DPW.
DPW.
Keeps our streets clear in the winter.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you for
Mr.
coming.
Chairman, thank you for having me, members of the board. So a brief overview of our department. Nice to see a lot of new faces as well as ones that were here before. We're comprised of 41 positions, 13 office, including 2 co-ops and 28 field crew. It's a one-shift department, Monday through Friday, 7 to 3:30. So any activities that occur outside of that are overtime related. So under the DPW umbrella, we have our engineering department, our conservation agent and secretary. the fire alarm, traffic light, and street light maintenance, our central vehicle maintenance, which includes the police and fire vehicles, as well as the DPW vehicles and the town-owned vehicles for the employees at Town Hall. Solid waste is a big component, of course, recycling and yard waste collection. Our support service, which is kind of an umbrella to catch all the things that don't have their own departments, such as picking up the trash barrels in the common locations and the odds and ends that come up with everyday business. We have a specific highway division, which takes care of our roadway maintenance. This is separate from the capital projects. When you see us pave, whole streets, this is just the crews that go out and patch and respond to requests from residents to perform maintenance activities. We have a forestry division, which maintains and plants new trees that are what we consider shade trees. So these are the trees in the public space, not on private land or inside of the town properties, but the ones that are lined along the streets. And of course, our snow and ice control, which we are right in the middle of in season now. So as far as the FY20 budget goes, we've taken the strategy that's been consistent with the guidance of the accounting department, but there are two things that kind of stick up off the page that are definitely discussion worthy and you should be aware of. So those are solid waste and snow and ice. So in the solid waste world, we're coming to the end of a 5-year contract for solid waste, and we're seeing right now pretty competitive and good pricing for what we're paying to collect and dispose of solid waste, recycle, and yard waste. So at the end of FY19, that contract's going to expire, and in the budget, we've included some conservative estimates for where we think pricing will go. The Board of Selectmen, the Select Board, has convened the Solid Waste Committee again, and we've also received a technical assistance grant from the DEP for help with the procurement process, so that we have a technical expert who is working with dozens of communities in our area on the best ways to form a new contract or negotiations to enter into our next phase of solid waste collection. So particularly in the recycling world, costs have substantially increased due to some market conditions, and also, like I said, we have some contractual terms that are favoring us. So just to give you some rough numbers, so our contractual terms right now for recycling disposal is about $16 a ton, and the market price is about $80. And because of our contractual terms, that difference gets absorbed, but that will be going away. So we're really taking advantage of some discount currently that will expire. So just to be aware that, that's why you see such, from a percentage standpoint, increases in the solid waste.
That's a huge increase.
It
It's
is,
like
yeah.
unbelievable.
That's crazy.
What has been pushing that? I'm curious.
So some market conditions globally, so the Chinese tolerances for what they call contamination, the recycling goods, got really strict,
taking it.
and that had an effect on the quality of the product that needs to be sent in order to be purchased. And also just capacity issues at local landfills and local processing facilities are getting tighter and tighter, which is just causing those unit prices to increase. So we're definitely seeing a trend towards a little more expensive, so we've just tried to project, but again, I don't think we're going to get the luxury of a nice 5-year deal when it comes to disposal. I think we're going to have to watch this a little closer and probably adjust maybe a little more frequently.
What's the standard now rather than a 5-year? What do you think the town will look for? 2 to 3 if they're lucky?
Our strategy would be to lock in disposal as long as possible, because that really
Outright
controls-
disposal, just the trash
Yeah,
that
so
goes out.
the facilities are key because we're going to pay to transport that material. So the further away the facility goes, there's a cost to that transport that gets included. So the strategy will be to, make sure we have a place to bring our material, and then we can put it out to bid or negotiate depending on what we see is favorable. Again, this is what the Solid Waste Committee is working through right now with that assistance from DEP. And we have, a couple of avenues to try. We have the luxury of June 30th to get to. So we have time to do a public bid. We have time to negotiate. So there are options on the table at this point.
How many options how many companies are there that we would talk to?
So again, because of our unique situation, we're on a 2-day collection, which somewhat limits the number of companies that have equipment available for just those 2 days a week and not the other 3. So, and I believe all the feedback we've gotten is that most people in town prefer a 2-day collection as opposed to the 5-day. So we'd like to keep that.
Yeah.
And, you know, there may be a slight premium to that, but I think it's worth it in the long run. It certainly helps with efficiency. And, you know, we all know that the Wednesday before Thanksgiving is probably the toughest day of the year. But outside of that, it works really, really well. So,
Is there a chance that we can partner with other surrounding communities who
absolutely.
are also on a 2-day schedule?
Yeah, and it's a great idea, and that's something we're looking at too, if there are opportunities, because there are some communities in our immediate area that have expiring contracts at the same time we do. So
Perfect.
we are looking at that, yep.
Great.
How did you get the special $16 deal the last time?
So at the time that contract was executed, there was a market for recycling goods. We actually made money on them. So
Yeah.
they took our recycling goods and processed them and sold them, and we actually got money back. But that has flip-flopped to the other side of
Yeah.
the scale, and now we're actually paying to recycle.
So it's just a change in market
Exactly,
entirely?
yeah.
Okay.
Market conditions have really changed, if that's the case. That's a significant flip.
Yeah, and this is something that if you talk to anybody in the Commonwealth, it's a very common theme, and we're not alone in this by any means. Everybody's feeling this pinch. So, so if, move to snow and ice just
Please.
briefly. So the snow and ice budget has historically been pretty underfunded. You know, we're at $160,000 a year in the budget, and our, you know, 3 to 5 year average is more closer to $700,000 a year. So you'll see a larger increase request in the budget presented, just to kind of get us a little bit closer to an actual realistic number. So what we plan to do over 5 years is ask for a $50,000 increase, working towards getting closer, knowing that, you know, we don't want to push our budget too high, because once we've locked in that budget number, we can't roll it back to a lower amount. And snow and ice is something we can deficit spend in a year and make up for in the following year. So, you know, it's a more realistic plan, and you know, it certainly helps sharpen the pencil when you're dealing with real numbers and not knowing you're going to just blow your budget every year.
So I'm sorry, what happens if you don't spend it all? You said you can't roll it back?
So if
It
we,
doesn't go back to the
increase our
general?
budget amount in a future year, we can't decrease it. It has
Oh,
to
I see.
maintain at that level. Yeah.
So, but if you had $700,000 in the budget for snow and ice removal and it never snowed in the course of the year, does that money revert back to the general fund?
I believe it would, but the problem would be is the following year, we couldn't ask for 500.
understand. Yep.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think it's just MGL.
That's statutory?
Yeah.
Wow,
So it might be a better,
that might be an interesting
Response from the town
discussion
accountant,
point.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
really.
The incentives
Yeah, I mean,
are wrong.
One
yeah,
question
I
on
think
Chad.
so.
Do you have the ability, now that you can do unlimited year-end transfers between budget line items?
Just
And
paper space.
I mean, it used to be just a, what was it, 3% or something? But
Yeah.
I believe now there's no cap on it.
correct. So what
So
we,
can you move from snow, if you didn't spend your snow and ice in a particular year, could you move that line item to a?
yeah, if we have shortfalls in other items, we should be able to move it within, and it ends up, usually it's the opposite, so usually snow and ice is in a deficit.
Right, yeah.
And we end up taking money from vehicle maintenance in the DPW budget to try to cover that deficit before we have to look for reserve fund transfers and that type of thing, so.
Right. Yeah, my basic question was, you know, if you did get that budget up to a more realistic number in a particular year, you just had a mild winter, you still can use the money, I
Sure,
guess.
yeah, I don't think we'd lose it, yeah, sure.
Fix more potholes.
So those are the two things I thought would be worth highlighting, at least for this discussion. I know we could get deeper in the weeds in a subcommittee meeting, but aside from those, everything is pretty much level funded except for anticipated utility cost increases. And just, again, grateful for all the support from the Warrant Committee over the years. If you look at the DPW yard, we have a lot of new equipment. The age of our fleet has come down considerably, and hopefully you see it out there during those storms.
Well, this is one of the questions I was going to ask you. Do you have enough up-to-date equipment, do you think, to get us through the next couple, 3 years?
Yeah, so our large fleet inventory is in great shape. That I would say 100% we're very comfortable with. Where we're seeing the need now is the smaller stuff, pickup trucks and smaller sedan-type cars, which, you know, obviously as they get older, their maintenance costs increase, but proportionally to the larger vehicles, it just doesn't have that same effect. So we're in good shape on our large fleet, and, you know, we'll work to try to keep those smaller vehicles running. And I will say, when we had our override vote 2 years ago, we created a position called a lead mechanic, and it really has increased the capacity of the vehicle maintenance garage. They're not sending out as much, and so it's one of those things where we're deferring more work to ourselves, so our vehicle maintenance costs creep up a little, but we're also not outsourcing as much, so in the overall picture, we are making out.
When we were in this position last year, we talked about tree planting and the budget for that and how that is going, replacing trees that are dying or been taken down for one reason or another. How does that figure in, and are we able to get match funding from any sources for that?
Yeah, so we had a very successful year. We pretty much maximized most of the funding that was made available, so that's in 3 places. So it's in the operating budget. We created a capital line item for new trees last year, which was funded and appreciated. And then there's what we call a cooperative tree planting account. So if there's mitigation money, if someone needs to cut a tree down to create a driveway, they pay into this fund to plant new trees for taking down a grown tree. So we've been using that steadily. 150 trees were planted this year in the fall season, and we're hoping for a few more in the spring. So as far as matching funds, we did receive a DCR grant. It's not huge one. We got $3,500 from DCR as a matching grant last year, and we continue to apply. We acquired a status called Tree City USA, which was a previous status held by the town. We got that back, which makes us eligible for more money from DCR, so we'll continue to apply for those matching funds, and those are just made available as the Commonwealth has funding fit to fund that program. So.
Right. Further questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a nice
Appreciate
night.
you coming in. Take care.
You know the irony that $400,000.
There's a station.
Welcoming Chief Grant. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. How are you?
We're good. How are you doing with all of the things that are in many moving parts in the fire department budget this time?
Well, not so much in my own budget. We're generally pretty simple budget. So with that in mind, keep my presentation pretty brief and then just answer questions. We basically operate at the very, very minimum level, manpower-wise, that I feel is safe to be out in the street in. So our total budget is $5.8 million, roughly. We are 95% personnel costs, so there's not a lot of room there. From last year to this year, we did make some modest increases. We look to increase new equipment $15,000. We have a $20,000 increase in training in there. And then in general expenses, there's a couple of increases that, don't amount to much. So that's, in a nutshell, what, the difference between last year.
Jack, question on personnel. I know you're not, you're out of contract now, so there's no contractual.
There's no, we're currently under contract, but
Yeah.
June 30th, we were out.
Right.
Yes.
But I noticed that the payroll budget actually went down a little bit. Not much, but a tiny bit. From $5,459,000 to $5,457,000. So what's driving that? And some of it's a sick leave buyback, I can see, but aren't the longevity?
Some of it
Have
will be
something
sick
that go up.
leave buyback. There's been some new hires, so there's
Right.
some new people that are not getting longevity at this point in time.
Okay.
What else would be changing it?
It's just kind of remarkable to see something that isn't going up at 3 to 5%.
But it fluctuates,
Sure.
People are cheaper, right?
It'll catch, I know, but it's
New
still
people
very
cheaper.
refreshing
That's the extent of it.
nonetheless. It's rare that we see this.
With that as well, your educational incentive goes down because the new people haven't acquired it yet. So those account for the fluctuations. It'll be back.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, go
do you
ahead.
have just say piggybacking on that, since you said in your presentation that the fire department's kind of at the bare minimum
Yes.
personnel-wise that you
Yep.
consider safe. How many firefighters or personnel are you above that sort of safe threshold? If we lose a firefighter, say he moves, goes to a different community or something, we have vacancies or.
Well, if they, it's a little more not much more, but it's a little more complex than that.
Yeah.
We're virtually never at our full staffing.
Oh.
I have 2 vacancies that I'm in the process of filling right now. And from the time you call for a civil service list until you get somebody, through the physical process and the physical abilities training, and you can't even apply to the fire academy till all that's done. So in reality, it's about a 6-month process from the time you call for a list till the time you have somebody working. There's usually a backlog of 180 to 200 people waiting in line to get into the fire academy. So it's a lengthy process. So, those coverages, take place through the overtime system.
Okay, yeah, because I know from previous discussions in last year budget process that basically to have like one person on shift, you in essence have to hire like 6.
You need to hire 4, yeah. We have
So-
4 working groups that get us through the week.
So I was more wondering like how close to that line at minimum line.
We're
If we
always-
lose a few or a couple.
Yeah.
Would we be
It,
in jeopardy, in essence?
It's not many, because you're always dealing with, somebody in and out. So it takes 11 people to maintain all the apparatus. If we dip below 11, we can no longer have everything in service. Most of the groups are staffed with 14. One of the groups is staffed at 13 when we're at a full complement. So we operate pretty closely to that minimum line.
Can I ask a question about the way that you receive new fire workers? So I heard you just say that you rely on the fire academy and the process when you call for a new, like, let's say somebody retires, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so your rate of attrition, blah, 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 you bring new people in, but you have to contact the fire academy to go through a process. I'm wondering what you're doing as a chief to make sure that our fire staff here in Milton is diverse, and that it tries to represent the community that you're serving.
That's actually controlled through civil service.
And how does that work? Can you just explain that to me
Yeah.
really quickly? Because if like the next 500 people are all white men, that's concerning on another level, on a different thing. I just don't understand, so could you?
Yeah,
Seriously.
Civil service tracks exactly, how the demographics of the town are.
Okay,
And then they take all the departments that are under civil service and they track what your demographics are.
okay,
And if your demographics meet the town's demographics, you hire as you hire. If you're under for a certain demographic, they will give you that minority list. If you're above that, you can request it and they will not give it to you. So it's based on, a
on
comparison.
the whole
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Because I recently, when they were talking about building the new stations, they were talking about the bunkhouses, and I was like, oh, how is this gonna work? Is it gonna cost us more money if we have to do individuals? But it seems like you already do that. But then I was told that we only had 2 female firefighters out of 54, I think.
56.
56.
Yes.
So where are you with, because I'm pretty sure there's more than 2 women, like at.
In Milton.
In Milton. So like, where are we at here?
It's not so much a minority.
Right?
No, I wouldn't think so.
You just answered the question. Women are not considered a minority.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't think so, I didn't either.
We learned that at
Civil
one point in
service.
time
How
because
about
we
that?
had, somehow they allowed this to happen. We had, one of the women that we had transferred to a different department. And the town at the time said, we want to replace her
Right.
with another woman
Right.
firefighter. And they did allow it, but they did make sure that, and this is before my time, not before my time on the job, but before my time in this office. They made sure that the department knew that that wasn't a minority, and somehow they allowed it to happen. And the way we got two is the person that had transferred out decided that it was a better pasture here and transferred back in.
Nice.
So,
Thank you for that.
yeah.
I appreciate it.
I'm going to ask the same question I asked Chief King. In the event there was some catastrophe, are you staffed with appropriate equipment and people to handle?
We're staffed, like I say, at the bare minimum that I feel that we can provide some level of public safety to our people.
Okay, extrapolate that.
I will.
Good.
I'll continue.
Bare minimum makes me a little nervous.
Well,
That's what it gets.
for our, and it should, to be honest with you. We operate 3 engines across, well spaced out across the town, so in coverage area, we're actually in very good shape. The NFPA the standard would put 4 people on each piece of apparatus. We've got 3 people on each engine, and we've only got 1 on the ladder truck. So on a fire scene, you're mixing and matching. We're largely residential, so, in more often than not, the fire problem we see, we're able to operate within. I wouldn't want to do it with less. In the event of a major event, there's positions in place, plans in place. We're a member of both Metro Fire and Norfolk County Fire, and we utilize both. Norfolk County's got a very good system of communication set up that, although Metro Fire is actually more heavily populated and more urban departments in it, Norfolk County offers 4, they've got Channel 1 is their base unit, so beyond that, they've got 4 fireground channels. And what's evolved in the last probably 10 years, because it was coming about right as I was coming into the office. They don't want you operating at an emergency scene on your general radio channel. What they found is, if you've got other traffic on that radio channel,
You get jammed.
you could be stepping on a very important call.
Yes.
So we shift over and utilize Norfolk County for the communications end of it to have a completely segregated channel for any emergency operation. It works very well for us because most of our immediate neighbors, Quincy, Randolph, Dedham, Boston, are all members of both. Canton is not, but Canton's not, Westwood's not, but they all have all the channels. So communications is good. They're not far away. That's in a relatively routine end. As things get bigger, an event gets bigger, you just work your way out. We've got a 10-alarm running card set up that will bring in, apparatus from as far out, as those fire districts circle. Once you've exhausted your local regional mutual aid, there's a plan in place called the statewide mobilization system. A good example of that was the Lawrence Andover incident. We dispatched engines up there on 2 occasions during that whole scene. So, like I say, those plans are in place to build, from a single engine incident. It's that, the national incident command system is built just that way, to take a single engine on scene and just build on it to as big an event as you can get. The process just kind of keeps expanding. So it's actually a very good plan.
Well, I ask these questions as a survivor of the World Trade Tower attack, seeing what happened there and how many people were involved in the evacuation and in the aftermath, and
Yeah.
the really heroism of the first responders. Always sensitive to make sure that the resources are available for communication if they're in the building and can't get out or whatever. How do you get to them if you
Yep,
can, et
yep.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the corollary to my question is, do you have the up-to-date technical equipment, communications, logistical, location, GPS, et cetera, to make whatever emergencies easier to manage?
I would say yes and no.
Okay.
That end of things, as far as radios go, we're in good shape there. Yeah, you know, in my period of time, we issued new handheld radios to everyone. Those are still viable at this point, and I expect they will be for, you know, 6-8 years to come before we have to think about, you know, updating them. In the last year, we just rebuilt the infrastructure of the external radio system. We now have antennas and receivers on each of the towers at the Blue Hills and at Quarry Hills. So that's erased some dead spots that we had. So the radio system's in pretty good shape. As far as GPS and that type of thing, you know, that technology hasn't really come around to us in a usable manner yet. It will.
Yeah.
You know, communications and tracking is always evolving. You know, one of the things I'm looking to do over the next couple of years in the new equipment is, you know, get another set of thermal imaging cameras, you know, and it shows you how quick they come in and out of life expectancy. You know, I upgraded them the first year I was in the office.
How old are the ones that you're using now?
So they're coming up, this is my 10th budget cycle, and I believe I did it in my first year. So, you know, they're 9-10 years old, and we're...
Almost time.
It is time.
Yeah.
You know, I've actually got, we like to have one on every piece of apparatus. So the 3 frontline engines that are on the street every day, as in a perfect world, what I was aiming to do, and I haven't accomplished this yet, one on every piece of apparatus, so you have 3 that are in service every day. We'd like to have the backup engine set up so that it's plug and play, so that everything that's on the others is on that, so you can just put it in the street and go.
So as we anticipate having information from the Fire Station Building Committee, building is one thing, populating and equipping it is another. At what point will we start to see requests for sufficient equipment for the new sites?
That would actually be built into that whole process.
Okay.
That's the way they do that.
Okay,
They
that's
actually build that pricing into that.
So new ladders, new whatever's...
Well,
sprays or
apparatus
whatever.
is a
Apparatus is
different...
what I'm asking, basically.
Oh,
I
I'm sorry, I
apologize.
misunderstood
No, I
you.
apologize. I should have been more explicit.
There again, I think it was the first year that I was in office, we did put in a system to replace the fire apparatus. So basically, through capital needs, pretty simple math, 3 engines, you know, let's replace them every 5 years. That way, nothing on the street is older than 15 years old. So, and we've done 2 cycles of that now. So, and we just last year purchased a new engine for Atherton Street. So the next engine, 4 years out, that will be replaced will be engine 1 right here. So what we do is each of the engines is in service on a frontline basis for 15 years. That engine that's coming offline then becomes the spare piece. We use that for an additional 5 years as a spare, and then nothing is on the street after 20 years. And so far, it seems to work. Even 15 years is a lot to expect. NFPA standard likes to see it as 10 years frontline service and 5 as a backup. And, you know, like I say, so far we're seeing that 15 is working for us, but you are seeing a significant bump in, you know, repair and cost from 10 to 15 years.
Like any other car.
Yeah, yeah. With a far different price tag.
Of course, of course, of course.
I think the one, what is it, every 10 years you're doing the ladder, or?
No, the latter is the same, 15.
15.
Okay, so it's-
Yeah, so the way this came about in my head is during the end of Chief Larson's time, or the middle to the end of Chief Larson's time, he had 2 engines that died on the floor, needed to be emergency replacements, as well as the ladder truck. So I think in 4 years, we replaced 3 pieces of apparatus. And, like you say, when you really just looked at it, it
That's
was
$2 million
kind of
worth
simple.
of equipment.
And you know what, you're looking at, in those cases, something that was sitting out there already put together, and, so you don't have a lot of say in the setup of it.
Yeah.
So this has been a good system. So with the ladder truck, though, it sees less road use.
Right.
So my hope there, and there again, we've got to look at housing, that would be the issue with that. But I would hope that right now, we do not have a spare ladder truck. So once this one gets replaced, I would hope that we would be able to maintain that for an additional 15 years, so that you always have that spare truck as well. And I don't think that's too much to expect.
Any other questions for the chief? Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep up the good
Have a
work.
good night.
You too. Thanks very much. Okay. Capital needs. Amy or Mike, which of you wants to handle this one? Amy, great. Amy Dexter, Chief Accountant for the town. Thank you for coming, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Just a little clarification, do you want me to present the fire station building committee approval recommendation that the capital committee did, or just focus on the May town meeting?
You can do the town meeting. I think we're okay for the fire
Okay,
station
so
for the moment.
I never, as co-chair, presented the other one, but the 2.7 did have full support of the capital committee.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we were happy with what we got. We got plenty of information on it.
okay.
So
okay.
this is we're very interested to hear about this one.
Okay, so basically, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee received a total of approximately $87 million in capital requests for the 5-year period, fiscal 20 through 24. Of that, about 10.4 million was for FY 20, a little bit, because that 2.7, some of that was in FY 19, which is a little bit unusual because the request came in the fiscal year that they needed it for. So of the 10.4, basically the approach that the town administrator, Dennehy, as well as the Capital Improvement Planning Committee took was that we felt that we were going to focus on anything that was a safety issue, infrastructure improvements, building repairs, maintenance type of things, and that we were going to take a step back a little bit on the equipment and some of the wants as opposed to must-haves. Town Administrator Dennehy did speak, and I was present with each of the department heads to see the impact of pushing off some of these requests 1 year. So we did not take them off the list. We just pushed them. If they asked for them in fiscal year 20, we said, what would be the impact of us pushing those off to fiscal year 20? In light of the large request for the fire station building committee, we didn't want to overextend the town on debt service until we had some more information related to that project. So the recommendation as it stands today of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee was in full support of Mr. Dennehy's recommendation to the Capital Committee. How it works is the town administrator will go through the request, come up with a recommendation, present that to the Capital Committee, and then the Capital Committee will kind of work from there. But what was presented to the Capital Committee by Mr. Dennehy is what ultimately was approved. Maybe a few minor things, but there was communication back and forth between myself and Mike. So basically, the total recommendation for FY '20 is $1,943,152, of which we're recommending that bonds be authorized for $810,601, and that non-bonded capital items of $1,132,551 be put forth. Of that $1,132,551 of other sources, we're recommending that the funding be $390,500 of free cash, $592,051 of bond premiums related to the August of 18 issue. I believe there's an article related to that.
Which we
So
approved.
the only hiccup there is if for some reason that article didn't pass, we would have to reevaluate that because that money would be off the table. I don't anticipate that happening. It's pretty likely. Most communities are adopting that. And without that, we're kind of handcuffed as
Yeah,
to
right.
what we can use the
Yes.
bond premiums
That's right.
for. And then,
Particularly because it's match funded, basically. You're matching maturities with what's available.
right, so
Right,
what
so-
it does is, they said basically in the past, any bond premiums, you could, would either go to general fund revenue or you could apply it to debt service in the future. There's some bond premiums on the books related to the school building project that were amortized every year to offset debt service. But now with the municipal modernization, we take this vote to apply the premiums, we could just say, okay, yes, so this, basically the 592, we designated that as roadways because it has to be, there's different portions of it depending upon the life of the asset, and almost all of the bond premium issued in August is 5 to 25 years, which, of a useful life, which the roadways fulfills. There's still a balance left of that premium around like 80 to 90,000. That can only be used on a 30-year or longer project. So right now, we're thinking of that for the fire station building because it has to be something with a 30-year life. So that's where that stands. I did include in the recommendation a list of what wasn't funded because I thought that that would be helpful to anybody to say, okay, this is great, this is what you're recommending, but what aren't we getting that was asked for? And basically across the board, all the department heads were on board with the, not only the recommendation, but as well as, I think we'll be fine if we delay these things for a year. That doesn't mean they're definitely going to get them. It just means that at this point in time for May town meeting, we're not recommending that they be funded at this time.
Okay.
The only other thing I'd like to point out is, on the letter of the recommendation, the committee felt the need that it was probably pretty important to start including the useful life that the committee's using in its projection. So what we do is, when we're looking at things that are gonna be bonded, that useful life is really important because it often mirrors the term of the bonds. And Mass General Laws sets a maximum recommended useful life for things, and you can ask the select board to take a vote to extend that to mirror what we're using in our projection. So, for example, the fire apparatus. Mass General Laws, it's a piece of equipment. Mass General Laws, 5 years. Well, in reality, $500,000 over 5 years is not realistic, it's not practical, it's not really how we operate. So we would ask the board to extend that useful life to 10 or 15 years. And then we would issue bonds within that period. So this is really important so that everybody's on the same page as what is the capital committee projecting, what are they using, and those projections, if it's in the body of the article, it's very clear. No confusion when that article goes to the financial advisor, the town treasurer, or anybody involved in the bond process. So I think going forward, that's a good idea to include that in that article.
Can you give us some idea of the equipment that was requested, the capital assets that were requested that were not approved?
For fiscal 19.
Yes.
So the cemetery was asking for a 1-ton dump truck with a plow and sander. That was to replace a 2008 piece of equipment. So the piece that they have right now is 11 years old. But
Is it still, it's still serviceable? All right, okay.
the DPW request included several like utility trucks, dump trucks, some smaller stuff like a roller and a skid steer, which I'm not exactly sure what that is. Again, the DPW director felt that,
He could
you know,
do
he's
without
very
it for the-
thankful
yeah.
for all he's gotten the last few years
Sure.
and felt that none of that would be problematic not to get it in FY '20. One of the big projects that was requested from Mr. Dennehy and Mr. Berkeley were trash toters, similar to the residents receiving the recycle carts. It would be to provide a similar, maybe smaller trash toter. He can probably fill you in on more of the details, but you would go to an annual billing process rather than buying the stickers. So you would pay an equivalent of $3 a week. There'd be an opt-out program if you didn't want, like, so say you're a single-person household, you don't put trash out every week.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want the big barrel, maybe you'd rather just opt out and just buy stickers. But majority of the households would probably prefer to have the toter, pay the 100 and whatever it is a year and not worry about it. And in the event you did a clean out and you had to put out more bags or barrels, you could still buy stickers. But I think the whole thing with that is, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but we're losing some revenue for people not putting stickers and not getting caught. And
Yeah.
this way, we believe by doing this, you would see an increase in the collection on that.
How much has been lost by that? I'm kind of surprised by
lot.
that.
A lot.
Really?
That's right.
Oh my God, tons.
Honest to
Yeah.
God.
Uh-oh.
Tons. Tons.
That hasn't been my
Yeah.
experience. If it doesn't have a
They
sticker,
don't
it stays
check-
there.
They don't
Oh, they
check
take
for
everything.
stickers.
Jeez, really?
They're just going too fast. They don't have enough time and they just dump. They don't look for stickers.
Gee.
So we used to have used to go out every so often and inspect barrels.
Yeah.
But that's pretty labor intensive to go around the whole town.
Mike, I'm
Preservation
interested.
of records.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. Yeah, so it was, my plan was to piggyback on the recycling initiative,
Right,
right?
remember that.
Hand out 64-gallon
Yeah.
carts to all the residents
think
in the
that's been pretty
community.
good, actually,
It's
hasn't it?
working very
Yeah.
well, and we'll probably be able to quantify it next month after, we'll look at a quarter rather than month over month. Obviously, Christmas is the holiday season's a very big recycling time.
Yeah.
But the idea was to piggyback on that, and then, as the town accountant very eloquently said, mirror that with a much smaller trash barrel. Not get away from the sticker system, but try to annualize that barrel as a tax bill, as a trash bill, if you will. Surrounding communities, Braintree, Dedham, very successful at doing it. Other communities tend to buy bags, which gets cumbersome. There's shelf space issues at
break.
retail establishments. The idea of this was to invest another $400,000 like we did last year with the recycling barrels, thanks to this committee and town meeting, and do the same, but at a smaller size so as to still promote the recycling
Yeah.
initiative. I will say, to add on to DPW Director Berkeley's comments, our current recycling facility, Waste Management in Avon, likes the material that Milton delivers to them.
You were
right?
saying
They're
that.
actively
It's clean.
talking about negotiations. From a town-by-town perspective, we have clean material, and they like that, which is good for us
Sure.
when it comes time to get to the end of this contract. But the idea of that $400,000 was try to bring in a trash bill, alleviate the inconvenience of having to buy stickers, take out of the equation that driver error or resident non-compliance, which happens. It's a rainy Tuesday night. No one wants to go get stickers at 10 minutes of 11. Put the barrel in, see what happens. Believe me, the men and women that pick up trash for Sunrise Scavenger on a daily basis have the toughest job in America. I worked with them in Boston. Unfortunately, when they work on Wednesdays and Thursdays in Milton, they're coming from Boston, which doesn't have a sticker program. And it's just lift the lid and go. So I don't think it's on purpose, and I don't think the residents are not trying to comply, but it's something that we figured we could capture a little more revenue that have been lost and make it a lot more convenient for people who want to put stuff in the solid waste stream to do so. But-
It is different from the annual sticker program in that it's an opt out as opposed to an opt-in. Like, you can buy an annual sticker now.
You can, yeah. And we have seen an uptick in it. We've been promoting the annual sticker. It's always available. Every week it's prorated, halfway through the year, the $156 sticker is half price.
I don't know anything
Right.
about it.
You slap it right on your barrel.
Walking through the
And you're
treasure.
done for the year.
That's it, one sticker.
It's amazing.
How
And
much
they
do you
change
think that
colors.
you're losing?
So if 7,000 residents bought this barrel, we would probably grab another $300,000 or $400,000 a year, based on the annual. We're getting about $800,000 a year for stickers, not mattresses stickers, not air conditioner stickers, not just residential weekly trash. If we collect $156 as a trash bill for, let's say, 7,000 people opt into this program, we could reap $300,000 or $400,000 more.
So it would be, you would apply, you would say, okay, I'll take one,
Right.
my 156.
The barrel is your tax, is
Right.
your trash bill.
But the following year, would it just be automatically billed to you?
Yes.
So is it like?
Yeah.
not-
And we've been working through that. We don't know whether we need a town meeting article to do this, or how we'd have to form the trash bill per se. Braintree's, you literally get a bill, and there's a residential reduction for aging population. There's requirements that are met. So the 156 for someone that's 65 or older is not nearly as much. But to the town accountant's point, there are people in this community that don't put out a trash barrel every week. Stickers would still be available for them. But that was the idea of that. It wasn't a must-have. It would be something that I would certainly look forward to next fiscal year.
How have you prioritized or asked the department heads to prioritize requests of this nature?
More of a public safety nature, you know what I mean? I think when people look at the equipment that we have around town, we have a brand-new street sweeper, and a lot of it came from the work that was done here. There was some philanthropic stuff that really improved some of the equipment we have on the street, but it's been the dedicated work of the Capital Improvement Committee, Warrant Committee, and Town Meeting that really put nice, new equipment on the street for the town. That is consistent. I think the oldest piece of equipment that was being asked for was 11 years old. That's not bad in the public works world, right? In Boston, we got it to 7.5 years on average, which is great. And to former Selectman Hurley, co-chair of the Capital Improvement Committee, we need to make sure that next year we get back on track and that we don't lose it for a year or two, because then that 7 or 8 year old vehicle becomes 9 or 10. And if we don't have that replacement program back, then we've kind of lost our traction again. So we are in a good place of keeping it moving, but we kind of paused from that this year. There was one other thing that we didn't fund. Bill Ritchie from our Consolidated Facilities Group, he manages all buildings in the town. There are 2 roof projects that he's going to do this year. There was a 3rd roof project for the Glover School, which he quite honestly said, I can't handle 3 roofing projects. I don't have the wherewithal to be in 3 different places at 3 times to do that. So we opted out of the Glover School, I believe. So they're going to do Tucker and one of the roofs down in Public Works. But they rightfully so, he can't manage 3 projects this year for roofing. But
I think it's important to note, though, that nothing was requested has been not approved. It's been pushed a year. So there has been nothing, there may have to be at some point in time. Because if you think, we've put on a lot of capital equipment in the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years probably. And we tend to bond the longer useful life stuff. So a couple of things have happened. Number one, we put a capital plan together, and we think it's a good plan. We've got it planned out to make sure that we're kind of staying within parameters that we've come up with. The debt service isn't going to be more than 2.5% of the total tax levy for the year. Utilizing as much free cash as we can to fund things. But when you start putting that on that bond schedule, the first year you put $1 million on, it's great, it fits. The next year you put another $1 million on. So now, in that second and third year, now you're paying debt service of $2 million. The next year you put another $1 million. Now, 3 years out, you're paying, debt service on $4 million, you know, so we're at that point now where it's hard to add anything to the bond schedule without going above that 2.5%. So we've got to rethink it a little bit, I think.
But in that same vein, and I completely agree with you, when you look at what is being pushed off to next year, a lot of it is DPW projects and facilities. And so I just wanted to highlight that there's a few things at the bottom of that list, technology and the two things from the town clerk, that are very tiny, that have to do with preservation of permanent records, computer hardware, which is not a sexy thing, but is much needed, and
Yes.
the election poll pads.
Those are all discussed.
But
they're-
I'm just saying, like, I know that a big truck to plow away snow is something that's really eye-catching and we can all understand it. I just don't want to forget the little things
Couple of things.
that are just not as eye-catching.
First of all, some of these things really are not capital projects. Preservation of records is not a capital project. It should be in
Totally agree.
the, should be
It's
in the
in there,
operating
though.
budget. Yeah, there is so much stuff.
Totally
We've
agree.
deferred so much maintenance for so many years in this town that we wound up with all this stuff in the capital budget. It's not capital, it's repair and maintenance. It should be in your operating budget.
Agreed.
When we first established the Consolidated Facility Department, we said, great, we'll just go into the individual departmental budgets and we'll kind of get their repair and maintenance and move it into
Yeah.
every single department. We don't have repair and maintenance budget.
How does that
line
work?
item. There is not one in
How
our
does that
budget.
work?
We haven't had one for years. So that's what's happening. But those specific things, we discussed those with the town clerk, and she can wait a year. They're not crucial
No, they're not.
this year.
But just don't
So in
forget-
that vein, my question is there anything, I mean, there's always an emergency of some sort. Have we had anything that has required emergency funding, or do we anticipate, I know you can't anticipate, but if you had to, where would we get the cash to, if there were a fire or, I forget insurance, but if there were a catastrophic event of some sort, and we had to come up
Our
with some cash?
stabilization funds are in a pretty healthy place.
They are.
They can always be healthier,
Of
right?
course, everything. You can't be too thin or too rich,
Famous
right?
last words, right?
Right.
So we do have some very healthy stabilization funds. We honestly wish we could give some more to roads. We know the impact of roads on a daily basis in this town. If you look at the number, 592 of the 622 comes from the bond premium. The other $30,000 kind of rounds it off and makes it what Chapter 90 gives to the town on an annual basis. So we at least wanted to match what the state gives us for roadway funding. I will mention one smaller note, and I want to thank this committee again. The Hendry's demolition diversion, which this committee allowed $396,000 to fund, is embedded in some of these numbers on the second page of their recommendation. We anticipate about $150,000, anywhere from $150,000 to $170,000 coming back to the town. We're waiting for the MBTA to finalize their bills with us, so I appreciate that.
That's great.
We welcome that money,
And that goes into the general fund, Mike?
it doesn't have to go into the general
It's not.
fund if we.
So I misspoke because of the non-bonded, that 150 is factored. So it's
okay.
390,500 free cash, 150,000 left over from the demolition project, and then the 592,051
Okay.
from the bond premium. I just left that out of my notes, so,
Okay, so that's spoken for, got it.
yes.
Got it.
And it's coming soon. I had a conversation with the MBTA spokesman last Thursday.
Checks in the mail.
Checks in the mail.
Love it.
Not part of the 6.3 increase.
God help us. Okay. Are there any other questions for our chief accountant or our town administrator? We'll look forward, the subcommittee will meet with you also and go parse more into this, but thank you very much for the preparation. Thank you for getting us the budgets. While I have you, I think our next meeting Monday, and membership can chime in because I think we're nearing the end of our meeting, would like to have Parks and Rec the library, the cemetery, I think also, I think they
Okay.
presented, and Blue Hills Regional.
Okay.
You know, because last year we ran into a little bit of timing issue with them because their budget cycle was a little later than our review cycle. Is it possible to ask them to come to our next meeting
Sure.
with whatever they have prepared so that we can factor that in and we can start to look at those numbers as well? Because I don't want to run into a little bit of a pinch that we kind of had last year.
And we can start to talk about the revenue side of the sheet as well.
That would be
The
great.
Mass Municipal Association trade show was a week ago.
Yep.
The governor released his preliminary numbers. Obviously, that has to go.
Because that was my second question, is when we can talk. So if we put that on the agenda for next week, we'll be fine.
Sure.
Perfect. Okay.
So we should be able to get the spreadsheet
Yes.
next week?
Well, I have to present it to my board first. I haven't presented it to my board yet. It's,
Okay, so we'll be, everything in the sequence will be correct then?
Correct.
Excellent.
yep. And thank you again for your work on the February special town meeting.
It was, we pushed, but we got it done.
Right.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, we'll make sure that we have the agenda published on Wednesday for next Monday's meeting. The Chair apologizes on last Wednesday. I blew it on the Martin Luther King legal holiday. I missed it by a day. I should have had it in a day earlier than it was for our agenda, so I apologize for my oversight. And so we won't have that problem again, but we plan to meet next Monday at 7, February 4th. February 4th. And we'll plow through. I encourage the subcommittees to form their meetings and get together with the department heads as quickly as possible so we can begin that process. If there are any other questions that have to be reviewed by the general group, we can bring them up in time so we can start actually working on the budget and reviewing any questions that we may have for the individual departments and just work it through in time to start that draft of the next warrant. But thank you very much. If there is no new business, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second? No questions, no comments, all in favor? Thank you very much. See you next week.
I know, it's the 4th.